So a lot of people have been asking me about this World Health Organization pandemic treaty and what is our position on that and what does it mean? What's all that? So we're just going to dive into this and explain it. So to understand this pandemic treaty, you have to understand what is going on with the World Health Organization and its relationship to America, its relationship to China. So the World Health Organization is a division of the United Nations, which itself is a big red flag. If you know anything about the United Nations, they typically always do the wrong thing. That's kind of my short assessment of the United Nations. So the World Health Organization is under their auspices, and it's got a beautiful name, right? The World Health Organization. Who would be against a World Health Organization? Well, let me tell you what's happened to the World Health Organization in the last several decades. So the World Health Organization is in charge of kind of alerting health professionals and the public at large over potential public health threats. So, every so often, I, as a physician, would hear, oh, the World Health Organization says there's a bird flu outbreak or a H1N1 swine flu outbreak, et cetera, things like that. And, that was how I thought of the World Health Organization. When you go back to 2002, there was an outbreak. I think it was bird flu, I think, at that time. And the World Health Organization blamed China for the outbreak of that pandemic. That, I think, was a bit of a turning point for the World Health Organization. China, if you look back on history, China really started coming onto the world stage really in the 1970s when Richard Nixon sort of opened up dialogue with China. But before then, really, China was kind of closed off to the world, and it wasn't really an entity that I would say the Western world really paid much attention to. But it really kind of graduated onto the world stage in the 70s, and it has been very rapidly trying to assert itself as a world leader. And they have a long history of, as a people and as a culture, of being, very sensitive to the concept of embarrassment or humiliation. Obviously, nobody likes to be embarrassed. Nobody likes to be humiliated. But I do think it is more of a cultural issue in the Chinese worldview than, for example, in the American worldview. So in 2002, when the World Health Organization blamed China for this pandemic, China got very embarrassed. So China decided to take over the WHO, right? Because it really didn't want the WHO coming out with any more proclamations that blamed China on the world stage for something that the world then got mad at China for. China had egg on its face, didn't ever want to go through that again. So it made a very tactical political decision. We are going to control the WHO. This is very foreign to how Americans think. Honestly, we simply don't think like that. Americans think in terms of days, maybe weeks, sometimes months, but really our attention turns away after that. The Chinese Communist Party thinks in terms of centuries. I mean, I don't even think they think so much in terms of years or decades. It's really centuries. It's just the way, that's the mindset there. So when the Chinese Communist Party was very embarrassed in 2002, it took very specific steps to take over the WHO, quite frankly. So we all know that Dr. Tedros is the WHO chief right now. He's in the middle of his second 5-year term, right? So Dr. Tedros is the guy in charge for 10 years. But exactly who is Dr. Tedros? Before Dr. Tedros came to the WHO, he was the health officer for his home nation of Ethiopia. When he was the health officer in Ethiopia, Human Rights Watch reported that Tedros engaged in widespread political persecution, right? He withheld food and medicine from Ethiopians that were of ethnicities unlike his own. Specifically, I am told that the group that was hurt the worst are the Amharans, who are now, quote, missing 2 million people due to lack of food, lack of medicine. This was under his tenure as the health officer of Ethiopia. Prior to being the health officer of Ethiopia, he was actually the third highest member of Ethiopia's Tigray People's Liberation Front, which is a hard left organization that became part of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, a known terrorist organization. So Tedros is this hard leftist with a history of killing or allowing to be killed many of his own citizens. So in him, the Chinese Communist Party saw a tremendous ally. So when he ran for the position of head chief of the World Health Organization, he was running against 5 other people. Interestingly enough, all of them were medical physicians. The only one who was not a medical physician is Dr. Tedros. And that's the guy that China put forward. And he's in the middle of his 10-year term. And who was before Tedros? Well, for the previous 10 years prior to him is Dr. Margaret Chan. That was also China's selection. Dr. Chan was there for the previous 10 years. And really, she put in kind of the infrastructure to support the Chinese perspective on public health issues. So we're now in the middle, towards the end of a 20-year period when China's 100% been in charge of the WHO. Never mind whatever it's done behind the scenes beforehand. They are the people who've put the people in charge of the WHO. Now, has this paid off for China? Is this a good investment for the Chinese Communist Party? Well, you'll all remember that in the beginning of COVID-19, we never called it COVID-19. It was called the Wuhan virus. And before people accuse me of being racist, let me remind everybody that we very commonly call viruses and outbreaks related to the region of the world where they come from. It makes it very clear and easy for the doctors on the ground. So there was, for example, the Ebola outbreak. There was Lyme disease, right from Lyme, Connecticut. There's Middle East respiratory syndrome. Centuries ago, there was the Spanish flu. There's German measles, right? There's tons of these examples. So it was very normal to call it the Wuhan virus. But remember how the Wuhan virus just slipped from national and international usage? Trump was one of the last people to persist in using it. And honestly, I wish he still had. It would have provided much more clarity. But Tedros refused to allow the world to use the phrase the Wuhan virus. So I would submit to you that the Chinese Communist Party certainly has gotten a tremendous payoff in having the head guy at the WHO be their puppet, right? So they're changing public perception. Now, because the WHO is so important at framing public perception, and because the Chinese Communist Party has had so much success with this, what's going on with this treaty is we're calling it to the world that it's this treaty that protects the public health. I think this is a smokescreen for what it really is, which is to institute a communist, Marxist/Maoist takeover of our sovereignty by calling it by more palatable, more marketable, more American-friendly words. It wouldn't sound so great if you said, we want to take over your sovereignty and your ability to make the best decisions for your nation. It sounds much better to say, we just want to help control the public health. That's what this treaty is. It's using language that's a smokescreen for what's really going on, which is giving up our national sovereignty to not the WHO, but to the Chinese Communist Party, an elite few who's running the WHO. I think I've demonstrated that the Chinese Communist Party is running the WHO. This is critical that America and the other 193 nations that are members of the World Health Organization do not sign this treaty. I would never be a member of the WHO if I was in charge. I mean, the WHO has harmed America enormously. But we are currently a member, and we need to urge our representatives to not sign this treaty, to urge our allies not to sign this treaty. If you want more information, please go to whocontrolswho.com. whocontrolswho.com. Find out more. Please sign the petition. See you there.